No, Greeny, you know, it's not ridiculous as long as they are able to. And I heard Dan Graziano talking about this morning earlier on ESPN radio. Yeah, I listen to it when I'm in my car in the morning. It's all as long as they can get him enough reps. And it sounds like Kevin Stefanski is aware of the fact that in order to create a real quarterback competition, he has to kind of change some things in terms of the way he divvies out reps during the preseason and during the offseason. If he can compete with Dillon Gabriel, if he can compete with Joe Flacco, he can compete with Kenny Pickett, there's a very good chance that if this is an organic competition with a level playing field, he could be your starter week 1, no question about it.
Look, sometimes we attach this number now. He was a 5th-round draft pick, and I understand that there was a reason for that. I'm not pretending it doesn't matter at all. But what I'm saying is if he had been drafted in the 2nd round or the 1st, which is what we were expecting, then there'd be almost no debate about it, right? We'd be with exactly the same body of work in college and the same skill set. We would absolutely be forecasting him to be the starter, especially, Dan, when you consider the other options they have available.
Right, but he is a 5th-round pick, and there was another quarterback they drafted 2 rounds earlier this year,
right.
In addition to Joe Flacco, who helped them get to the playoffs 2 years ago, and Kenny Pickett, who he's in the mix as well. So they have 4 guys. They need to get them all practice reps. Kevin Stefanski, what Lewis was alluding to, he put 7-on-7 drills into the rookie minicamp. Usually rookie minicamp is just, classroom stuff, very basic stuff, nothing really, and in terms of team competition. But he wanted Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel to be able to get some reps at a time of year when they weren't competing with veterans for those reps. So he's very conscious, Stefanski is, of trying to make this as good, as close a competition as possible among all 4 of them.
I'm going down with the ship with my friend Mel Kiper on this one. He is the most underdrafted player that I can ever remember. I genuinely believe if he has a chance, a real chance, he's going to wind up making a run at the starting job there sooner rather than later. All right, the next one. Lewis, I was looking over on ESPNBet.com. The Bears' win total for this year is 8.5 wins. This is at ESPN Bet. They only won 5 games last year. So if someone said they're going to be the most improved team in the league this year, is that ridiculous?
That's not ridiculous at all. Look, I think, last year when we talked about the Bears and specifically offensively and the lack of development that we saw from Caleb Williams, we pointed squarely to Shane Waldron, the former offensive coordinator, and the fact that there just wasn't a good plan on top of the fact that there just wasn't enough surrounding him. Well, all of that has changed this year with Ben Johnson coming in, with the revamping of the interior 3 of the offensive line, and then the work that they did in the draft, Greeny, and we were there on the desk and we saw it. We saw them draft Colston Loveland. We saw them draft Luther Burden, wide receiver, tight end, respectively, to go along with a guy like DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze. This team is loaded offensively. Now it's about putting together a good plan and Caleb living up to his potential that he showed in college, that he showed at Oklahoma, that he showed at USC. And if all that comes together, this could be one of the more explosive offenses in the NFC and in the league overall. Now, I know that's a big leap. People say, hey, look, let's just crawl before we walk. Let's walk before we run. But look, this league, people can go worst to first in a hurry. I'm not saying they're going to go worst to the first in their division, but they will be much improved. One of the most improved teams in the NFL.
Yeah, not at all ridiculous. I mean, look at last year's Washington Commanders, how quickly things can turn around if you put the right people in the right positions. A lot of unknowns with that coaching staff in Chicago, but, they're well regarded, and obviously I think the defense will be good under Dennis Allen. So I think the Bears have a chance, but the division, as you mentioned, is rough. That is rough, and that is going to probably cost them on their win total because they're going to have to fight against those other 3 teams that all made the playoffs last year. Most improved team, I'd be looking more at like a San Francisco or a Dallas, teams we've seen do it and then had their seasons last year done in by injuries.
Oh, you mentioned Dallas, did you? Well, isn't that a good segue? So yesterday, A.J. Brown was talking about, of all things, the Eagles' biggest rival, and listen to what he said.
Now, we're going to have to worry about him, for sure. Hey, we're going to have to worry about him. No, I like the trade. I do like the trade. I like the competition, and I like George Pickens. I like CeeDee Lamb and that collab, and it's gonna be exciting to watch, bro, because all that does is bring the best out of us. So if we know how they coming, we know we gotta step it up,
Cowboys trading for George Pickens could wind up being one of the most undercovered stories of this entire offseason if he, and it's a huge if, plays up to his enormous potential. Their win total is only 7.5 wins at ESPN Bet. So, Lewis, here's a question I never would have thought I would ask on a show I host, but are we sleeping on the Cowboys? Am I not paying enough attention to the Cowboys?
I don't think so, Greeny. Look, I'm gonna look at this from two sides, okay? There's a reason why, you know, when we're talking about football and we're talking about team building, that's just not about physical skills and what things look like on paper. And the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers pulled the plug on George Pickens and said, hey, look, instead of like looking at this 3, 4, 5 years down the road and investing the kind of money we, you know, need to invest in a guy like you in order to retain you, meaning an upper echelon wide receiver, you know, we just don't think that the risk and reward is in our favor. So we're going to send you down the road to Dallas. So look, we understand the kind of things that George brings as a high riser, above the rim type of player outside the numbers as a true X wide receiver, a guy who can win one-on-one, who's a quarterback's best friend. But it's more than just that. It's about fitting into that culture, being a positive influencer on that locker room for 17 weeks. Not just for a mini camp, not just for a play here and there, but a guy who's going to show up on time, that who's going to be a force multiplier, who's going to be dependable, who's going to be a good team. Like all those things are what adds up to you, helping you make a team a contender, not just highlight reel catches.
You made an interesting point that they won 7 games last year without their quarterback.
Quarterback got hurt halfway through the season. I'm pretty sure that they've been over 7.5 in every one of Dak Prescott's fully healthy seasons. Then they believe that George Pickens coming into their leadership structure in terms of their locker room, in terms of the quarterback, in terms of CeeDee Lamb, right, they'll get the best out of him. 1 year on his contract, so lots of motivation. Best quarterback he's ever played with. That there's no offseason addition to any team that's as significant as the Cowboys getting back Dak Prescott.
I think that's fair. Let me leave that there for a moment, but we'll have more to say about it as we continue. Should Jalen Brunson and the Knicks be on upset alert in Game 1 tonight? We will show you why anyone sleeping on the Pacers is making a huge mistake. That's next.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các bạn nha. Mình sẽ giới thiệu cho các bạn về kênh của mình và những video của mình cho các bạn biết được là kênh của mình làm video sáng tạo nội dung về chủ đề gì. Video của mình sẽ làm xuyên suốt về chủ đề cắt dán này, mình sẽ cắt dán những sản phẩm như thế này cho các bạn xem. Còn đây là những sản phẩm mình đã hoàn thiện rồi, sẽ giới thiệu sơ qua cho các bạn xem những sản phẩm của mình và cách của mình tạo ra những sản phẩm như thế nào. Và để tạo ra được những sản phẩm đa dạng màu sắc như thế này và như thế này thì mình sẽ cần những dụng cụ như sau. Những dụng cụ phụ bổ trợ như là đây là giấy thủ công màu các bạn. Trước mặt bên tay phải của mình đây là giấy thủ công màu, nó có đa dạng những màu sắc để tạo ra những sản phẩm tuyệt đẹp cho các bạn xem. Đấy. Có giấy màu xanh dương này, giấy màu cam này các bạn này, giấy màu đỏ này, giấy màu vàng này, còn đây là giấy màu xanh lá cây. Đấy. Và trong quá trình tạo ra những sản phẩm của mình cần những sản phẩm, cần những dụng cụ như là bút dạ này, kéo cắt thì để dùng để cắt, bút dạ thì để dùng để tạo hình những sản phẩm. Còn đây là hồ dán các bạn này, hồ dán thì mình sẽ dán những sản phẩm từ một chi tiết này sang chi tiết khác, từ màu sắc này sang màu sắc khác cho các bạn. Còn đây, so của mình đây.